shopping center, it's probably cheaper to move somebody else out, but
So
for the actual...
we have tasked staff and technical study reports submitted to FTA to support the applications for the station moves. There might be some, I'm not sure how far design of the stations had progressed prior to the moves, but I could certainly get those figures.
And then at where's the line drawn as far as scope of a project to move our rail station? Like, I understand that construction at Alamana is a huge thing, but where do we say, we'll move or you got to move?
That's what the FTA does. They examine the original EIS. They examine the proposal, and if it's larger than what's acceptable based on the context of the FFGA and the EIS, then they'll say, no, this would require either a supplemental EIS or some other type of amendment to the record of decision. We can't unilaterally make even minor changes without FTA examination and ultimately approval.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Rep. Tupola.
Thank you, Chair. This might be for many of you, so as you see necessary, can you please approach the microphone? Thank you for being here. I guess my 3 comments are in regards to the city and heart, the audits and the 9 areas of increased cost, and then the options that we're looking at. So first off, the city and heart. It's really, I think, disheartening as legislators to be told by the city that Hart's going to answer your questions, and then when we ask questions, say, well, the city would best answer this, and is anyone here from the city? So we had, oh, I know you guys, but I mean, I think that what we really wanted to see was like a good interaction between all of us so that we could get those questions answered. Is anyone here from the city council? No. So a lot of times when we're asking these questions, like, Wes, I heard what you were saying, like, we need to ask the city for those questions. We're here in a very important hearing, and we're trying to figure out who's accountable, and some people say these guys say these guys. So in regards to whether or not, Wes, go ahead.
So we're not trying to give you the runaround, but we're obligated to conform to a city charter. And this is the charter that applies to the role of HART. The authority shall adhere to the fixed guideway system alignment of the locally preferred alternative approved by the council. Any new alignment, extension, or addition to the fixed guideway system alignment shall be subject to council approval by ordinance, except that any adjustment of the alignment necessitated by the impact mitigation shall not constitute a new alignment for purposes of this section. So when we're talking about a station moving 100 feet or so, that's within the purview of HART. When we're talking about a whole new study and something that would trigger having to redo the environmental impact statement or the full funding grant agreement, that's a question that needs to be put before the city council by what the charter says each group should be doing.
I understand. So in this body, how we asked questions in regards to changing the bigger picture, what you just mentioned in the second half of what you said, yes or no?
You have to repeat that.
So we talked about little rail station movements, but
right.
We've also talked about bigger questions
Correct.
like at grade, where it ends, what. So you're saying that city council has to approve it, yes?
That's absolutely
So
correct.
who's here from the city council? Nobody. And that's what I'm saying, though, is that that's what we're getting at, is we're suggesting things that the city council would have to approve, but nobody's here. And then when we talk about the small things and they say Hart's going to answer it. So it's not any attack against you guys. It's that we're circling around and people are tired of that.
Well, I'm sorry. I don't think any of us from the city understood that that was going to be a topic of discussion.
I think that all of us were wondering if that was a topic of discussion, because everybody has been having meetings around the island suggesting better ways that the rail could be managed. So in the event that we talk about ending it earlier, going at ground level, doing this, we would need all the players in the room to discuss those solutions, correct? We're
Correct.
here talking about how we could better run the rail and how we can fund it. So as we entertain options, as you read per the charter, we need the city council members here, correct?
That's correct.
And that's what I'm saying, though, is we're talking about a city project and they're not here, and we're here, and it's been a few hours now. And so this is not being taken seriously. And that's what I think my concern was with my first question. Who here works for FTA currently? Raise your hand if you work currently for FTA. Anybody? Currently? Nobody. So can you say that every statement that we've made about FTA is speculation? We're guessing that, you know, they've said this, they've said that, but we've asked a few out-of-the-box questions, and I know that we might have to go get answers, but is there anybody in the room that can answer for FTA right now?
Well, I think the questions you've asked about FTA have been regarding the communications from FTA, and the September 15th date is a very solid drop-dead date, and it's not one of these things where we can go back and forth and negotiate, because the whole structure of the relationship with FTA is a partnership based upon a contract.
Okay, so aside from the date then, some people have asked about scope. They've asked about changing it. They said everything we do, we have to run through FTA, correct?
Except for, as consistent with the charter, it deals with mitigating impacts of the alignment or the full funding grant agreement contact. So I think you've heard it several times said this way. The little things can be negotiated with FTA, but a big scoping change, that's not something that's open for discussion.
And I understand that part. The point I'm trying to make is if we were talking about FTA approving anything, we don't have anybody here that works for FTA. So we're speculating, oh, they wouldn't allow this, or this isn't allowed, or that isn't allowed. Or it would be really hard because, number one, they're flexible with schedule. Number two, they're flexible with cost. But number three, they're very resistant to scope. That's what we've heard today. So if that's the case, we're just guessing that number three would be a hard sell for us with the FTA, but we're not totally sure. If it's moving a rail station 200 miles and 200 feet, it's okay. So that's what I'm saying, though, is that there's no one here currently speaking for FTA that can actually say, I work for them, this is what we're thinking, this is what we can do versus what we can't do.
Well, you heard from Sam. I mean, he did
Sam, do you currently work for FTA?
not currently.
That's it. So that's all I'm saying is that I'd rather us speak about facts rather than speculate what we think they might do, what we think they won't allow us to do, because that's the point of this hearing, is to figure out what we realistically can do so that we can save whatever it is of this project and save our taxpayers some money. The second question I had was that there was a statement about 9 areas of increased costs, and I believe that this might be for Mr. Murthy. I heard 5 of the 9. One was design and construction. 2 was staff costs. Number 3 is core system. Number 4 was utilities. Number 5 was real estate. What was the other thing that caused the increase in cost?
Okay, the first one is design and construction. Is we have chosen a delivery method called design build.
Okay, hold on. I just want to go through the 9. So design and construction. What's the other thing that raised the cost? Because it wasn't in the slide. You were reading it, but it wasn't in the slide.
Okay, I'll give you that. Okay, after core systems and core system oversight, the next one is utilities.
Got it.
And then after that, real estate.
Uh-huh.
And then the owner-controlled insurance program.
Uh-huh.
And then legal costs.
Okay.
And the last one is the total contingency.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so with this one, with each of the 9 increased costs, you guys brought up 3 different things that you're going to do different. 1, you're going to evaluate the consultant scope. 2, you guys are going to make sure that there's a contract change committee that reviews contract changes over 500,000 or over $1 million, and then 3, that the contracts would be done by June 2018. So in all these 9 areas of increased costs, did you guys make a plan for each of the 9 things as to why they increased costs and how you guys are going to address it in depth?
We have analyzed where these costs came from, and we have now come up with, that's why the new checks and balances, like controlling the changes. And for example, whatever the escalation costs and delay costs happened in the past, that has already happened. But we now have a better control of what the escalation costs ought to be, and those are figured into our current budgets.
I understand. What I'm saying is that We all talked about the audits. There were 4 audits, 2 of them in 2016, 2 of them in 2017. My question to the mayor was about the audit, and he said you guys could answer it, so I'm asking it again. In the audit, you guys came up with 9 areas of increased cost. Was each of the 9 areas studied in depth, and was there a plan as to how we're going to address it? Say, for example, number 1, real estate. So say, for example, we see that the real estate starting to cost money. Was there a plan that you guys talked about as to how we're going to address each of these 9, specifically in regard to real estate, for example?
No, that's good. That's exactly what the city did in 2016. They did an audit. They identified some of these in their audits, and I have responded to each and every one of those audit concerns, and we are implementing them. Absolutely, we are implementing all of those.
I guess that's my question, though, is what are you implementing, like, in depth? So what we're saying here is that we love the audit, we want to be audited, we want to get better. What we're asking is, now that the audit's complete, we've identified 9 areas of increased costs. We would love to see exactly what's being implemented so that we can show some type of accountability as to what we're doing here.
For example, when a change notice is given to the contractor, and when they sit down and negotiate with the change, before it was a discussion between the engineers in the field and the contractors, and they will agree upon a price. Now, the new set of procedures that we have installed is they have to come to a committee with all the information, such as where did this change occur, how did it occur, was it a fault of the designer or it is a fault of the as-built contractor, where is the money coming from, is it within the budget, or do you have to go and dig into contingency? All of those questions need to be answered, and the impact of this change on the overall construction. So these are the new things that we have put in place, so we have a better knowledge of what is happening and how we can control the cost.
Thank you. Yeah, I think what I'm asking is, did you write it out? Because what you're quoting to me was what was in the slide, the 3 things you guys did, and that was in specific to one of the 9. I want to know if it's written out for all of the 9, what's being implemented to change the increase of cost in all those areas. Is there a document?
We have a change control document that we have issued to everybody, yes.
Can we have a copy of the document to see how
Absolutely.
the 9?
I'll be happy to send it, sure.
Okay, thank you. The last thing I had is in regards to the options being looked at, because from what the response was to one of the senators was that you guys are looking at lots of different options. There was lots of options suggested here. My question is, the last time we had this discussion in April till now, I don't see too many new options. I could be wrong, but I feel like I'm looking at the same thing all over again.
Well, the options now that we are looking at is for the contracts that have not been awarded yet, and that is the city center and the Pearl Island Transit Center and Garage. So that city, for the airport contract has already been awarded in last December. So what we are doing there is looking at the station designs, see if we can get some economy into optimizing that design. That's what we call the value engineering, and that's what we are doing on those stations.
No, and I appreciate that. I guess what I'm trying to say is that we've always verbalized it, but this presentation was, maybe a few audit things were new, but it looks very similar to what we talked about in April at our finance hearing. And there's a lot of good options that have been put out there from, getting public-private partnerships. It would be nice to see that some of these options were seriously considered in offsetting the cost as opposed to just talked about.
Yes. We are looking at the public-private partnership. Apparently, it requires some legislation, and I will leave that up to the city attorney to address that. But we are looking at the public-private partnership as a part of the upcoming contract, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Murthy. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Vice Chair Colin.
Okay, thank you, Director. As I think there's a lot of confusion on the information that we get from HART all the time. I think from Grabowskis in 2015, regarding what types of funding sources we're going to use. I think interim director is right there too at one point, and then we have you as an interim, and then we have the new director coming on in September. And as you can see, a lot of the questions is we have a lack of faith on how HART is operating the construction side of it. We already have a lack of faith on the mayor and the city and council on trying to take up measures on how they're trying to fund the project, besides coming to the legislature and asking us for either an extension or some other way to fund it. And even in as I look at the recovery plan, the only finance option we had was we're going to wait for what the legislature is going to do, rather than the city and the mayor trying to push, or you folks pushing on other ways to find funding for this project. So what is there going to be a different message from the new director coming on? Because you said you're going to have a little lag period to assist. Is there going to be some kind of new idea on how we can fund this thing, or are we just going to hear the same rhetoric from you folks?
Well, I cannot speak for the new director. I haven't even met him.
Thank you. He's not here then.
I've talked to him on the phone once, but I will certainly work with him and have these messages conveyed to him and see how I can assist him to get this in a more organized way. So.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Rep. Hastrom, followed by Chair Luke.
Has there any, this is to Director Murthy, has there any been, I know the answer to this will be it's going to increase costs, but has any analysis has been to extend the schedule? Because that's, from what we just heard today, that's the easiest thing to change. Instead of ending at 2025, extend it out to 2028 or 2030. Instead of in other words, trying to change the construction curve to more in line with your revenues coming in, so you don't have to float long-term bonds.
Well, we can definitely look at it once we know what that funding scene is. If the funding scenario says you have to go past 2025, then we have to look at what parts of the unbid contracts we can award and what's the timetable they can work with. That means we have to do it in pieces. But what happens is we don't know what that future cost is going to be. It could be quite different than the current 8.165 billion. 5 years from now, 10 years from now, what the construction cost going to be would be a different question.
Okay. I guess you answered my question. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair Luke.
Okay. Thank you. Going back to some of the questions by some of the senators about concentrating on the expenses side, when the state went into a recession, we did across the board 20% cut. So at this point in time, if you do across the board 20% cut, so at that point in time, we didn't go and raise taxes to fill the gap. If you do a 20% across the board cut.
I didn't hear your question. Can you repeat it for me, please?
Okay. So when the state went into a recession, we did across the board 20% cut. We didn't raise taxes. So going on the expenses side, have you folks, I'm not saying, if you do a 20% across the board cut, we wouldn't be here because you actually have the money you need. So we don't even have to talk about GET or
right.
TAT. You can finish the project if you do some kind of a major cut. So, for you folks, I would think instead of looking at we're going to need to fill this gap, you're basing it on your current estimated contracts, but you haven't gone out to bid for all your contracts, and you have outstanding contracts which you can reevaluate. So what have you done to look at cost cutting as opposed to, in the past you did coloring books, and I'm sure you still have coloring books in storage, but you must have had some ideas on where to cut, because you made some decision at some point in time that you're going to cut funding for coloring books.
We have been looking at the so-called option A, B, and C,
No,
which is...
that's not option A, B, and C, because
Right.
option A, B, and C is cutting actual rail
Right,
station,
right.
which is going to require a new EIS. I
Yes.
think you need to be very honest with the committee that, option B is going to trigger a new EIS. So what have you done, as opposed to in the last several weeks giving yourself raises, what have you done in cutting major costs?
Well, one of the things we have done is we have done some evaluation of the staff. We have made
No, I
some
think
changes in the staff level.
evaluation of staff is going to give you cost
Yeah.
savings of not even $1 million. I mean, we need to cut like $1 billion worth. And so there's no contracts out there that you can reevaluate and reduce.
One of the things we have done also is we have sent notification to each and every one of the consultants that we have about assessing their performance and then asking them to evaluate the personnel that they have employed on the job, and then telling them that we are going to go back to them with any deficiencies that we have found to date and go back to them and seek finances back from them.
Well, shouldn't you have been doing that already? I mean, from 2 years ago, the legislature has been skeptical of more funding. So I would think you should have started that process in looking at the contracts. But it's not just going back to the old contracts. It's reevaluating how much the cost for the new contracts and figuring out ways to eliminate or downsize certain contracts. Because unlike what you are making the public believe, the entire $8 billion is not all for construction of this rail project. Only about $4.5 billion is for construction. Everything else is for consultant fees. Her operation is going to amount to about $250 million. In addition to that, you're subsidizing some city services. There are tons of things in there that's not related to construction of rail. Only half of the amount is for the actual construction. So you have to tell us, because we deal with budget cuts all the time, and we look at ways to cut and reallocate or look at ways of restricting funds. I mean, you are telling me that you're going through the process, but I would think it would be prudent for you folks to look at contracts and look at where you have budgeted that doesn't require funding.
We are in that process, to be honest with you.
Okay, so you haven't done it.
Yeah.
So I would think if you have not done it, then if we were to order a forensic audit, we're probably going to do it for you. So I suggest between now and special session, you better take a closer look at what options you have in cutting some of these areas, because we might just do it for you. And I don't think that's something that you would want, because you would have different priorities. And the other thing is, for instance, you told Representative Tupola that some of the cost increases were due to attorneys' fees, projected attorneys' fees, and owner-owned what premiums?
Well, as I said, we are on the
Insurance.
process of...
Okay, so based on prior discussion with you folks, you have now, so I'm just going by memory because this could be wrong. So based on your last estimate, the owner-controlled insurance was $10 million initially, and you have readjusted that amount to $100 million. Is that still correct?
That is correct.
Okay, so based on our prior conversation, you folks have admitted to us that the $100 million is somewhat bloated because the insurance premiums will never go up beyond $50 million. This is a conversation I had with you folks. So even in spite of that, knowing that the amount that you will incur is around $50 million, why do you continue to bloat these project amounts?
Well, Owner-controlled insurance program was an option chosen by the city after doing a lot of evaluations.
Okay, we will
And
talk
so
to the city
we are-
about why they're making you bloat your numbers. The other thing is legal fees. You have readjusted that number from $9 million to $28 million, which is triple the amount. In addition to that, you're reimbursing Corp Counsel for their expenses about $1 million. I would think you folks are with heart. I mean, you folks are kind of with the city. They should either pay for your legal expenses. If it's an expert or outside counsel, you need to justify why the legal fees have bloated by a triple amount. But this is kind of a small amount. The reason why I brought it up before, and I'm bringing it up again, the fact that these two amounts were substantially more, and I know that you folks had admitted that these are bloated amount, it makes us question whether your entire budget or the contingency budget is bloated as well. So how do we know for sure that the 9 points that you ratted off are actual, real best guesstimate as opposed to just rounding it up another 50 million or 100 million to get to this desired amount? How do we know that?
Well, for example, in the construction side, most of the west side is pretty much done.
Okay, so
except for
at
the
least-
claims, so we know what that cost is.
Okay, so at least for the construction side, the estimates are fairly accurate. How about the rest of it?
How about
How about the rest of it?
the rest of it? That's what we are working on, each and every one of those.
Okay, so this is still your best guesstimate.
Yeah, I don't have final answers for you, how much we can reduce them, but we are definitely working on
So
those.
you don't have a final amount or estimate of how much of that is actually considered excess or is considered something that you can cut. You haven't done that evaluation.
There are two things to be considered here. One is what is excess, and one is what does it take to complete this project.
Okay,
The
but
way
you
it is.
guys, you have already admitted to me previously that owner-controlled insurance would never get to $50 million, but you continue to use $100 million in your base. $50 million, maybe it's small for you, but $50 million is a lot of money. And that could save, a percentage of the extension. So I would suggest that you seriously start taking a look at some of the cost-cutting measures, because as the city admitted, in as much as you want to continue to support a 10-year extension, the city admitted today that the 10-year extension would amount to a significant surplus or result in a significant surplus for the city and county of Honolulu. But the legislature was relying on both the city and Hart's testimony to believe that 10-year extension was what you needed. But come to find out, after we did our own analysis with our budget and finance, to realize the 10-year extension was in bloated amount, and only upon questioning that you folks admitted that the 10-year extension is more than what you need. Those are the kind of responses that we continue to struggle with, and those are the questions and responses that we have a problem with, because you need to come forward and give a real effort in showing us that your numbers are correct, in addition that you have done a real effort in cost cutting, and you are standing there saying you are continuing your efforts to do that. So do you have an estimate of when you're gonna have a report or assessment of true cost-cutting measures? I can point to you some of your big outstanding contracts, and I can tell you, you admitted to some of those $50 million contracts, which is not construction related. So I would encourage you to start looking at some of these huge contracts, which you have initially floated maybe about, several years ago.
We will.
You will? Okay, but when?
We'll look at it.
Yeah. I
We'll
mean, you're
certainly
leaving.
look at it
You're
and
leaving,
get back
and
to you.
the other
Yeah.
people are
No,
looking
it's a pretty
down, so-
serious thing. We have to do it. That's the only way we can control the project. I'm fully aware of what you are saying. So we'll definitely
Okay,
work
but
on
you're,
those.
you're leaving, so, okay. Mr. Yu, somebody's gonna do this? Or are you just gonna hope that we give you a 10-year extension, which is more than what you need?
But Robert is going to answer the question.
Okay, Mr. Yu.
You know, I could try to answer the question. Whether I could answer it to anyone's
No, the
satisfaction
question
is another thing.
when are you gonna take a closer look at some cost-cutting measures, and then when are you gonna come back and report to the legislature?
Okay, if you give me a moment, I'll try to explain the process that we undertook a month and a half to 2 months ago, and we're going to follow that process going forward. So, as of last week, we just completed reconciling all the revenues, every dollar of expenditures from 2007 to June 30th, 2017. I mean, every dollar you want to know, if you want to know when it was spent.
I think
And-
you're misunderstanding.
No, I
Is not the same thing as reevaluating these contracts and rewriting some of these contracts.
I understand, and I want to answer your question in an intelligent way. So before we could move forward with knowing what the contract cost for any specific contract is going to be, we need to know whether the amount that we spent on each one of those contracts is accurate. So we have gotten to a point where every dollar we spent on every contract, we could trace it from 2007 all the way to June 30th, 2017. Now, why is that important? It's important because every one of those contracts have a schedule going out to either the contract expiration date or the project expiration date. So, for example, I'll give you an example for our airport guideways contract. It's one of our biggest contracts ongoing now. In order for us to project what the cost for that contract is going to be ultimately when it ends, I think in 2022, and whether we could identify any savings with that contract, we have to know what that contract says, and we have to lay out the cost of that particular contract for the duration of its life. So after we do that, then we could take a look at each section of that contract and say, you know what, we estimated XX amount for this work, and it's supposed to be done on this date. Is there anything we could do to lower that cost? Or what is it that we could do? It would be the same as with consulting contracts. So we would list out all the monthly costs of the consulting contract to expiration. Then after that, we'll take a look at which part of that contract or which year that we could say, well, we don't really need 20 consultants. We might need only 10. And if that is the decision, then we could start projecting costs with a reduction in that specific consulting contract. So, you know, long story short, but, you know, we want to tell you that we'll do it in the next week, but, you know, we wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah, well,
we
you
would
should have been doing it already.
Well, we probably should be doing it already. I could tell you I agree with that 100%. But we're not going to review all the contracts and identify whether if there's any savings at all within any of those contracts in the next week or even in 2 weeks from now or 3 weeks from now.
Okay.
My best guess is it might take 3 to 4 months, because the other thing we have to do looking at that process is that we have to meet with the project managers out in the field to talk to them and to get their input on where they think the particular piece of work is at and what do they think we need to do going forward, if there's any areas we could save and continue to do the contract within the scope. So yeah, I can't promise you. In fact, I know we won't be able to do it before the special session. Yeah.
So you have several contracts that require change orders.
Yes.
That increases costs.
Yes.
So is that written in the contract that change orders are authorized? Or is that something at the discretion of HART or city administration?
Well, I mean, I
Because
could
my
talk
point
about
is,
it in
why would you
general,
have a
but-
contract and then you allow all these change orders?
Yeah, I could, but I think Sam could be a lot more specific than I can.
The question, excuse me, Representative Luke, Sam Carnaggio. So the question was, is it within the contract?
So the change orders that result in increased costs, is that written in the contract that you authorize certain percentage of change orders?
No.
Or is that?
No,
so-
they have to come to us and.
So they have to come to you and
Yes,
then you can
individually.
refuse?
Individually, and judgments
Okay, so
passed
you
on
can
each one.
refuse. You can refuse.
Yes.
Okay, so who makes the decision whether to authorize the change orders? So
they're-
why would you have a contract if they're going to have a bunch of change orders and you authorize it? Then what's the sense of having that contract?
Well,
What's
if
the sense of having
if,
low bid?
if something occurs in the field, if there's, say, an unforeseen line, if a contractor is trenching in a certain area and there's something there that we hadn't anticipated, then a decision has to be made. Do we pay the contractor to remedy that situation in the field? We have to make that decision.
Is there some kind of a check and balance of who reviews the change orders other than
Actually, the
you?
recommendation comes from the field, and as Mr. Murphy was explaining, we now have a system where it's reviewed.
No, I mean beyond HART? Is it
I'm
the
sorry?
HART board?
Beyond
or is
HART,
it
no.
the-
Everything's contained within HART.
Okay, so city council doesn't review the
Nope.
change orders?
No.
So is there some
I mean,
kind of-
they might after the fact.
So, okay.
But not
so
during the process.
There must be some kind of internal policy. If the change order is significant, you need to go back and take a look at it and have somebody else review it as opposed to just you folks. Because what if a contract is $100 million and the change order will result the contract total to about $200 million. So I would think there needs to be some type of mechanism outside of HART, or even the HART board should take a look at, okay, if there's a significant number of change orders, the way you view the project may be different from how the HART board may view it or how the city council members may view it.
Yes. All of the change orders are passed by our finance committee, but anything over $1 million has to be approved by our board, and we have sessions with each of the board members, 2 at a time because of the Sunshine Law, to review each of the change orders, and then during the board meeting, the board members will discuss it and say whether it's a legitimate, in their opinion, if we can go ahead with the change or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. House members, okay, Rep. Lopresti.
Thank you, Chair. On the change order topic, sir, if you can step back up, the other gentleman. You probably don't have this figure with you, but I would very much like to know the ratio of change orders that have been approved versus those that have been rejected. For example, can you think of any that have been rejected? Giving us an example.
Yeah, sometimes there's request from other agencies. Many of the change orders that we have in the field are because of field conditions, things that need to be changed. I can't think of too many what you would call owner-requested changes that we put in. We do have changes if another agency needs something. We'll process a change, and then they will reimburse us. But I can certainly get the percentage of those we've rejected.
I'd like that, and also since you seem to have different categories of change orders, to split them up according to the kinds of change orders as you see them.
Yeah, we can give you a complete breakdown of all the change
I'd
orders.
like that very much. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Murthy and Sam, for all the various information requests that were asked by members. Could we all have a copy of that and we can disperse them to the members? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. My question is, and to Bob and Murthy, if you can respond, with regards to the discussions on change orders and all the extended costs other than change orders. Does HART have the authority to do a P3 project? And the P3s are the public-private partnerships. And reason I say that, I just returned from a P3 conference on the mainland and looked at state projects, whether it's harbors, airports, specifically railroads as well. Many of the states do put out contracts with P3s. And my reading on it is it saves a lot of money. If a bid comes out and you need, as an example, let's say you mentioned that the next pending big project that's the contract has not been given, airport. So if a figure like, what, maybe 500 million or $500 million occurs, and you put it out for a P3, they bid on it and say, okay, if it's going to cost $1 billion or two, we will build it as is with those monies. If there's cost overruns, and the contractor is responsible for that as well. And we find that airports throughout the country, they're on time, on budget, and whatever. But I was just wondering if we can legally do that with the concept of your authority or the city and county, but, you know, or have you folks ever looked into any portions of it as a P3, or even looking at, okay, if we're here at our, we need to finalize the additional leg, then farm it out. But I'm just curious if you've ever thought about doing that.
Sure, absolutely. We have been looking at P3 as an option for the unawarded contract. And P3s, to be honest with you, are not free. They definitely come with a price tag. And the price tag is based on how quickly they can get their returns on their investment, whether it's a 20-year investment or a 30-year investment, and how much return they can get. So they will also be looking at a revenue source, dedicated revenue source from the city or from the state, whoever their client is. So we have to, first of all, do that. And then you can incentivize those contracts by throwing in concessions, like operate and maintain is another one option, where they have a long-term contract where they can make some money. And then, or we can, concessions like parking garages can be added as a part of the contract. So all of those things are definitely possible. And of course, more importantly, we need to make sure we have the legal means to do so on this particular project. So we are going to work on those things, definitely.
Yeah, because you brought to our attention that, you know, we're going to need the big parking garage. That's going to be a biggie as far as the cost is concerned. So if you work with a P3 on another project, then you're going to need somebody to operate or build the garage. But okay, just food for thought. And I thought perhaps if you're the board of directors, how many of the board members are here? Okay, how many of the board members outside of our non-voting members or the city? Just, thank you. Okay, well, you got the message, but hopefully that one part of the scenarios is looking at P3s going forward. Thank you very much. We are going to, members, I'm sorry. Any other senator has a question? Hearing not, we're going to hear from, I'm sorry. Oh, okay, sorry. We'll delay with HTA, followed by Senator Dela Cruz.
I just had a quick question on the workforce. At one point, there were at least 70% of the workforce that was not local.
I didn't get it. Can you please repeat?
The workforce. What's the percentage of local versus having to fly people in?
What? Yeah. Oh, okay. No, I apologize. I didn't hear the question. Robert cleared it to me. Most of our workers, except for some of the consultants with the key positions, majority of them are local workers. And the contracts that we award, they bring in some X percentage of 20, 22% of their mainland employees. Otherwise, they employ all the local labor force.
So do you have a chart of every year how that changed? Because at the beginning, we had quite a bit of workers we had to bring in, and the reasoning, what I was told, was a lot of the skills that it took to construct, we didn't have the workforce that was able to do it. And so my understanding is that it was supposed to be slowly transitioned out. So I just wanted to see where we are with that.
Yeah, from the last couple of years, because of the ongoing construction and all, I think there has been a knowledge transfer, I should say, between the mainland and the local people. So I think we have built up some good local force.
Okay, so if we can get just those numbers.
Yes. We'll do that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Hart, and we appreciate your taking the time as well. One moment, please.
Thank you.
Oh, okay, sorry. We have one more question.
Okay, thank you very much. Rep. Cachola.
Of the total funding, how much is spent so far?
From what?
The total funding for the rail project.
Okay, can I answer that?
Yeah, well, I'm sorry, could you repeat the question, Representative?
The total funding
Yeah.
for the rail project.
Yes.
How much is spent so far?
It's about almost $2.8 billion.
2.8 billion out of how much?
Out of, you mean in terms of total GET collection is
Yeah. Of the total amount collected, how much is spent so far? I want to know how much was collected.
Okay, we collected almost $2 billion in general excise tax from 2007 to today.
And then?
We collected $806 million in federal grant money from the signing of the FFGA to today. We spent about 2.77, or let's just say $2.8 billion in expenses. So if you take those two numbers, and if you add the $80 million of our net borrowing from commercial paper to June 30th, we have a cash balance of about just over $22 million at the end of June. Now, without the commercial paper, we spent more than the revenue took in.
Okay.
By
Of
about
the total
$60 million.
amount that were spent,
Yes.
is it all used for the construction of the rail or some other projects connected to it?
It's all used for the construction of the rail as defined in the city ordinance, which is the local preferred alternative.
The
The short answer is yes.
Planning for TOD, oriented development.
Yeah,
Transit-oriented development.
Yeah, you know, other than
Were
buying...
there amount from those collected spent for that?
No, other than the properties that we need for the right-of-way, we're not paying for any TOD programs that are undertaken by the city.
Can you put that in writing to be sure that there's no funds collected used other than the construction of the rail?
Oh yeah, sure. Other than the property we need by the rail station to build the station and the ingress, egress, the right-of-way for the property, yeah. Sure.
Okay. We want to make sure that it's all spent for the construction. Thank you.
Sure.
Done? Okay. Thank you again to the Hart members, and for board members who remain, thank you for being here. We'll continue with the hearing. We'll start now with the HTA. Nobody here from HTA, then we did receive their communication. We'll move on to the hotels or the contractors who are here. Whoever is here, will you be at the podium and stand in line if you want to speak? Because we have a long list of them. I can read most of them. I don't see too many coming. Okay. All right. So here's what I'll do. I'll read the first 5, and I'll go with another 5. Aqua Aston. Okay. Castle Resorts, Davis Cruise Agencies, Hawaiian Dredging Construction Company, Hawaiian Hotels and Resorts. Please come on up. Okay, seeing none, I'll go with the next batch. Healy Tibbetts, that's the builders. Hilton Hawaii, Hilton Waikoloa, Hyatt Centric, Hyatt Regency Resort, Kapalua Villas, that's Maui, Marriott Resort, Waikoloa Beach. Anybody available? Okay, hearing none. Things are moving. Okay, Marriott. Okay, Mauna Kea Resort. And by the way, we all have testimonies from these people. Nan Inc. Nordic PCL Construction. We got Outrigger. Prince Resorts. And that's Prince Resorts, Hawaii. Okay. Let's see. Mir Mufi, are you HDA or lodging? Lodging, come on up. Yeah, we're getting bored here not hearing somebody speak. If we haven't had enough, but aloha, good afternoon.
Aloha, thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to be here today. Earlier, we had several dozens of my colleagues in the industry that are here. They had to excuse themselves, they apologize, but some of them are still here. On our testimony that we have submitted, there are over 140 signatures and folks from the Hawaii Lodging and Tourism Association that support the position that we are promulgating today. I want to, first of all, thank you for this opportunity to be here. We are here today and taking a position on this because in our conversations with some of our members have had with the executive branch, with conversations that we've had with some members of the legislature, and on the agenda that we see before us today, there are 2 options for the GET that are on the table. So this is why we're here today, to express our support for the general excise tax as the funding option for rail as opposed to the transient accommodations tax. I want to make it real clear that our industry, hospitality industry, is decidedly pro-rail. We believe rail would not only be good for the visitors that come to Hawaii, but obviously for the workers, especially those who work in Waikiki, and we're especially enamored by the prospects of transit-oriented development that, if done right, could lead to a lot of workforce housing opportunities, as well as beautify and enhance our city. I want to just mention a couple of things about our hesitancy with respect to the transit accommodations tax. Mention was made of the fact that the cost of doing business in Hawaii, especially from the hospitality industry, cannot confuse the record numbers of people that have been coming to Hawaii over the past 6 years with record prosperity for the industry. The cost of doing business has gone up. 40% of our expenses every month on the average goes to payroll. And of course, we're all aware of the rising construction costs. You've seen many wonderful projects that are happening in Waikiki and other places. Hotels are reinvesting, shop owners are reinvesting, and that comes with a cost and a price. Certainly, we know before you are some very difficult choices, and so I want to maybe take my testimony down a different path. I've always believed, whether I was in the public sector or private sector, if you are not going to be in agreement with what is being proposed, you need to suggest other ways of meeting your very difficult challenge, which is financing the cost of rail. The first thing, Madam Chair, I want to point to your discussion about public-private partnerships. I have long felt that that's where the city and heart should be going. I cannot understand for the life of me why we haven't started here at home. I know when I was mayor, Kaka'ako wasn't moving until we said we wanted to bring rail down Kaka'ako and go to Ala Moana, and look at it today. I don't see a plan. I don't see any kind of a program that's been put forward to meet with those local landowners, the folks that have made a lot of money because of the fact that rail is coming through those areas, to see what they can do to help defray the costs. And I know that there are individuals, there are developers there from Hawaii that have been willing to step forward and contribute to the cost. Now, on the larger issue of public-private partnerships, I think you are spot on. That, to me, should be the order of the day if they're going to use public dollars and go beyond Middle Street to Ala Moana. I've seen this P3s work on the mainland, and you will be pleased to know that the new director for HART is a big believer in P3. I've known Andy Robbins for a long time. I've had several discussions with him already. He believes P3 is the way to go. If you do P3, to me, that's one of the best ways to mitigate against government always coming and asking you for money when it's short. Now, it's not going to be easy, but to say that we are just studying it, to say that there are challenges in front of us, my feeling is figure out a way to get it done. It's worked on the mainland, it should work here. You're absolutely right. As long as that private developer knows that there's going to be a repayment plan, that government somehow is going to guarantee, and however you decide to extend the tax to make that happen, they assume the risk, they put it on a budget, they put it on schedule, and I really believe that's the way to go going forward. And if somehow that can be emphasized in language, in whatever you folks are going to do to approve this new project going forward, or the funding, that should be a part of it. Let me talk a little bit about Airbnb and that whole issue. 2 years ago, we urged the governor to sign the legislation that was before him that would allow you to start collecting monies from that segment of the hospitality industry. In this last legislative session, the hard work of Senator Wakai and Representative Onishi had us at the table, both sides, trying to figure out and work out language that we could both agree on. At the last minute, we were surprised when the executive branch came down and said, maybe we'll do a memorandum of understanding with Airbnb, which would obviate the need for legislation to be passed. So I really believe if that's where the executive branch wants to go, that's certainly a pocket of money that should be factored into the mix that comes from the hospitality industry. I've also gone on record urging the county of Honolulu to enact some kind of legislation that will enable them to start collecting from that segment that is not paying the TAT or real property taxes or general excise taxes. Kauai does it. Kauai, remarkably, is collecting $25 million from what they call the TVUs. It's a separate classification that's occurring right now in Kauai. Honolulu should do likewise, because as you said, and I totally agree, they should be putting more skin in the game. And that's one way I believe they could do that. Speaking of skin, I just want to bring this up. I know that when I was mayor, the split was 90-10, and that was something that we had to do to ensure that the bill could be passed, if you will, back then. I know that $1.9 billion has been collected, and $219 million has gone to the state. If that could be looked at again to see whether, in fact, you could lessen the amount that the state takes off the skim, perhaps that's another way of getting some monies in that regard. On the Department of Taxation collection of the GET, I know it's done on a quarterly basis. They submit to HART in January, April, July, and August. And I think you're exactly right. Some of you have said that those monies have come in under projection. $1.9 billion has been collected through the GET. And I think the last figures I looked at, they're $63 million short of what was anticipated to come in. I think for the private sector, we'd like to ask, why is that happening? Other than the fact that forecasts perhaps were maybe overly optimistic, but we know from the hotel industry side, when we collect the TAT, we give it to you on a monthly basis. We're not late on it, I believe. And certainly also the general excise tax that is collected on every hotel bill that we submit to the state, which makes us a very convenient target because of the fact that you can almost count on what we're bringing in. But let me also talk about the TAT in this fashion, according to what the figures I saw today in the analysis that you put forward. The reason why we say the TAT is volatile, if you look at your own numbers that you put on one of the charts that I saw, in 2008, you collected $229 million in TAT. In 2009 and 2010, those numbers went down to 210 in 2009 and 224 million in 2010. Then in 2011, it went back up to 284. In 2012, it was 368. 2013, 395. 2014, 420 million. And 2015, 446 million. The growth between 2011 and 2015 was very mixed and haphazard, if you will. The growth from 2010 to 2011 was 26%. In 2012 was 13%. In 2013, 13.9%. But in 14 and 15, it fell to 6.5 and 6.1. That's why we say the TAT is volatile. It depends on the numbers and the figures and the people that visit us. But more importantly, I also saw another chart where you're saying that you're basing it on the growth of TAT being 8% every year. If you look at the recent figures, it hasn't been at 8%. So that's why we would urge some caution in those forecasts if, in fact, you're looking at the TAT. And last but not least, we'd like to urge HART and the city to make people ride as soon as possible. I hear you. I hear what you're saying. Maybe they should lengthen the construction of it. But there's no reason why, once they hit Aloha Stadium, we couldn't ride. We heard the bus company say today that they could reconfigure the buses. I think that would create the kind of momentum we're looking at. It would create more interest, more appeal, that once it hits Aloha Stadium, people will ride. They'll reconfigure the bus routes. They'll have them come in, take them as far as they can go, and especially our workers on the west side who are looking for better ways, better means of getting to work every morning as they rise at 3 or 4 in the morning in Ewa, Waianae, Waipahu to come into work. So those are some of my comments, and I'd be very happy to entertain your questions.
Okay. Questions from the Senate first? Members? Okay. Seeing none, will House?
House members, any questions?
Chair Aquino?
Yeah, Rep. Ward.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Mufi, for being here. Thank you for the passion that's coming back up as it was in the beginning. Here's my question. How do you operationalize what you otherwise call the P3, look at Kakako, piece of cake? How can you do it going out to the West Coast? Why not? Eva, how do you get a public-private? I asked earlier Mr. Murthy about development rights, which they do all over Japan and in Hong Kong. Why are we not doing some of that out there? And you said, well, look, Kakako was an example. So could you take that, extrapolate it, stick it out into the 20 miles out there?
I don't have all the facts before me in terms of the dissemination of these contracts, but this much I know. All the contracts have been spoken for up to Middle Street. It's Middle Street to Ala Moana that's still up in the air. And this is where I think if you incorporate principles of P3 into that, I think we can draw the private sector interest to be a part of this project. Number two.
What would that look like, though? I'm trying to, okay, the P3 looks like, give me the structure of the incentives you're going to take in the private sector.
Right. I think it's going to need some legislative help, both at the county level and perhaps the state level, to be able to do this. But from what I understand, my understanding of it is basically is that they may have to change, if you will, the way that they've been putting it out in the procurement process, and therefore say that this is going to be a different kind of letting of the contract, if you will. That's number one. Number two, that may require, as I said, some legislative approval. Three, I think the whole idea is to ensure that the private sector knows that this project is believable, believable, it's doable, and it has the guarantee of government financing is how they're going to get repaid. And then you have to mix in all kinds of incentives. I think Mr. Murphy mentioned some of that today, whether it's the stations that are part of it, whether it's the advertising is part of it. But anything that would do incentivize them where they know at the end of the day they're not going to lose their shirts on this project here. So what I'm suggesting is that it maybe requires a master developer that will be in charge of going from Middle Street to Ala Moana. That master developer then puts together a process by which others can participate in it, so-called the subs that are part of every contract that goes out. But they all understand now is that government steps back, the private sector steps forward, they assume the risk, the financing is put in place because there's going to be a guarantee of some kind of repayment to them, and that's how it's basically worked on the mainland where I've seen it work, where they've built airports, they've built hospitals, and other systems.
So essentially, it's an in-kind process. You build a station, we'll guarantee that you're going to get paid because of the revenues that will follow from it.
Yeah. But they have to know, yes, but they definitely want to know that they're going to be repaid. And I think that's where there's an opportunity now with this new director that's coming in from Harvard, Mr. Andy Robbins, who has had experience in working on this on the mainland. And number two, he really believes in that. I asked him myself, is this something you would do if you came in? I think that's a breath of fresh air. It's the best thing I've heard coming out of Hart in the city, that he's prepared to do that provided he has support from government.
I haven't heard you use the term development rights. So you don't have condos or other things in mind where you take a piece of zoning and you flip it and you make the value go 10, 20, 100-fold.
Well, I think when we talk incentives, I mean, that's something that I think they'll have to work out to see what it is that this developer would be looking at. But I think, in my opinion, everything is negotiable in this area here, especially when you have half the system already built. Certainly we're looking at him or her to be able to follow through and make it happen. And I think it'll help assuage all the concerns we all have. You know, when is this endless coming to the legislature asking for more money to complete a project when we can't even answer how we've spent it so far? And secondly, what's the guarantee going forward? You're not going to be back here knocking on our door again.
Exactly. That whole development corridor, that whole 20 miles is supposedly an invaluable resource for where the future development's going to go. But who's going to make the money on that other than those who already own it versus those who can rezone it and have development rights to make something different? You mentioned Kaka'ako. What's the value of what it used to be and what it is now? It's huge.
Oh, it's huge. And as I said, I know this for a fact. Nothing moved in Kaka'ako until we said, we're going to build rail, it's going to come through. And then you saw all the interest taking place, lots of people making money of it. I can't believe for the life of me why we haven't had a proactive plan to sit down with many of those willing developers and ask, what can you do to help us defray the costs?
We're 10 years in and we haven't got $1. We haven't got $10 in 10 years. So it's about
And the
time.
thing is that, you know, although Kaka'ako is noted for a lot of, you know, high costs, high price condos and the like, there are some developers there that are trying to do workforce housing there. And they have appealed to a very limited market. But I think if you did that across the board, especially as rail starts coming in from Middle Street, going through Kalihi, imagine what Kalihi would look like. Imagine how Pearl City, Aiea, Waipahu would look like with all of this. You know, we talk affordable housing, you know, I think the term is workforce housing. We want housing for our people to be able to afford, live here, and most importantly, transform the character of those neighborhoods for the better.
20 miles of opportunity. Thank you, Mufi. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Okay.
Thank you. Any other House members with questions? Okay, seeing none.
Thank you, Representative Ward. Just for your info, they built San Francisco Airport, how nice it is, in 3 years on a P3. Okay. Yes, Senator Wakai.
Thank you, Chair. Hi, Mufi. Thanks for coming today. You talked about the volatility of the TAT take over the years, and I know there are some who think that our 9.25 TAT is low by comparison to other cities. And I'm looking at the top 10 cities in America who have the top 10 hotel taxes across America. It starts with Houston at 17%, Indianapolis, Columbus, San Antonio, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco, Austin, and New York at 14.75%. And when we talk about just the volatility of tourism, isn't it true that these cities that I've mentioned that have a higher hotel occupancy tax than Hawaii really rely on convention business and business travel more so than resort travel?
That's true.
And when I look at, I just pulled Miami out, for example, which I thought was another resort destination. Their hotel occupancy tax is 3%. So if we're going to compare apples to apples, we should be really comparing Hawaii's TAT with other resort destination TAT, because from what I understand, when looking at the convention center bookings in the out years, it's looking pretty bleak for Hawaii to drive convention and business travel here. And who knows what Kim Jong-un, who knows what Mother Nature will provide for us to send tourists to other destinations. And by us piling on more TAT, whatever the percentage figure might be, will only give a visitor another reason not to come here and go to Miami or another resort destination, because we can't really rely on convention and business travel here.
Yeah, and I think another thing to look at is our average daily room rate. Right now, we lead the nation in average daily room rate. We're charging $254.73. Washington, D.C. is second at $223 a day, and New York is third at $201. And I think you folks raised a really good question about resort fees, and let me try to give you my mamna'o, my understanding of it. There was a lot of discussion within the visitor industry about resort fees. And if you look at it today, not every hotel is charging a resort fees. It's basically the brand hotels that are charging it. The independents don't charge. Our chair, for example, and he was here for as long as he could, Scott Ingers of Trump, they don't charge a resort fee there. Halekulani doesn't charge a resort fee. And then, of course, the smaller hotels don't charge a resort fee. And the reason why we were beckoned to do that, or I should say when we huddled and talked about it, individual groups and the like, is that to keep up with the Joneses, if you will, they found that our mainland competition were charging resort fees. And they were using that to go into the marketplace and advertise their advantages of being able to come to their place as opposed to here. So it's a cost of doing business, but also in terms of just a situation whereby to compete, we needed an extra pocket of money to be able to do that. So it's not a standard practice across the board, and I know it's very confusing to understand that. I mean, it's like when I go and fly now, and being a big guy, I gotta sometimes go for the best leg room and so forth. And there's all kind of fees that are being assessed now. They charge you for your meals, your luggage fees and the like. And I think in the airline industry, you're led to believe rising fuel costs is why they do that. But I think it's one airline does it, another one does it and the like, then it becomes a competition, if you will. So, I know that's a confusing issue. That's why I just wanted to share with you my understanding of why we have resort fees, but it's not a blanket policy across the board. Some choose to do it, others don't.
Okay, but that question had nothing to do with resort fees. Do you agree that piling on whatever percentage onto the TAT for a resort destination, which Hawaii is, will only give visitors another reason not to come here?
Oh, it's a very price-sensitive market, absolutely. And I think we have seen time and time again, we've got to be careful of that. And let me just share with you this way, and this is not to cast aspersions on anyone, but in 2009, when you last raised the TAT, it went from 7.25 to 8.25. And it was said to the industry then that you wanted to raise it to 9.25 to go from 2010 to 2015. But it was POW in 2015. But in 2013, legislature went back and said, no, we're going to make it permanent. So that's why there's some apprehension anytime you talk about the TAT. We have gone on record in the past to support TAT. It hasn't been 100% like everything else, but there have been members of the industry who have understood the need for the state to charge the TAT. I think the concern has been, instead of it going to tourism-related purposes, right now the largest recipient of the TAT is the general fund. I think according to our calculations, like 52% of the TAT goes to the general fund to fund other things. So that's always the concern that we have, that, shouldn't we be reinvesting that back into the industry to make sure that we're staying ahead of the game with others, because you never know. We're a 6-year cycle of great tourism arrivals, knock on wood. We hope it'll go on and on and on, but there are signs that it may be slowing down.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And we will continue on with the other hearings, those testifiers that are here.
Well, thank you very much for your
Mahalo.
patience and forbearance with a
Appreciate
very
it.
difficult issue. Mahalo, thank you.
For the first group that I called, anybody here? Otherwise, I will read the names all the way down to the groups. If you're here, please just show up, then we'll go into the individuals. Prince Waikiki Hotel, Ralph S. Inoue, Company Limited, S&M, Sakamoto, Sheraton, Maui Resorts and Spa, Trump International Waikiki, Unlimited Construction Services, Waikiki Resort Hotel, AFL-CIO, Hawaii Construction Alliance, Hawaii Steel Alliance, just let me know, yeah. ILWU, Local 142, Ironworkers, Local 625, Laborers International Union, Operative Plasters and Cement Masons, Plumbers and Fitters, Local 675, UPW, ARDA, BIA Hawaii, Grassroots Institute of Hawaii. Okay. All right, okay. And while he's coming up, HLTA, Be Ready, Honolulu, Traffic, I think that's it, and Kapolei Chamber of Commerce. Aloha.
Aloha, aloha mai kako e mau aloha, ame mau kupuna, aloha. I just want to thank all of you legislators for your hard work. My name is Keli'i Akina. Although I am a state official elected and a trustee in the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, I'm here in my private capacity as president of the Grassroots Institute of Hawaii, from whom you've received a good amount of research and testimony in your respective committees. Although you have my testimony before you today, I really want to share just one major point. We are in a crisis of public confidence in terms of government funding and management of the Honolulu Rail. That crisis has split our community into two polar extremes, those who are for the rail project and those who are against it. You as legislators now have a tremendous opportunity to bridge that gap, because there's something that you can do that our project, audittherail.com, has shown us. Thousands have signed that petition to audit the rail and have contacted us at the Grassroots Institute to let us know that it doesn't matter what side citizens are on, whether they're pro-rail or whether they're anti-rail, they're for greater financial accountability. Now, we've had a discussion of the term audit here today, and I would like to point something out. We've got to be very precise in terms of the call for an audit. The former managing director of the City and County of Honolulu, who is now a HART board member, said audits aren't necessary because it's just mucking around in the past. Our own Mayor Caldwell, on July 20th, spent about 20 minutes discussing the numerous levels of audit, federal, state reviews that have been conducted for the rail. And the point was that an audit will not yield further information. Nothing could be further from the truth. At the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, I am the chairman of the ad hoc committee on auditing OHA, which is something new. Because although we've had numerous audits through the years, in 38 years there has never been a comprehensive search for fraud, waste, and abuse. And that's what I want to encourage you all to take a look at very carefully. There are federal audits, there are compliance audits, there are performance audits, but only a forensic audit that specifically searches out fraud, waste, and abuse will answer questions like why the cost projection for the rail has gone from $2.7 billion to a total of over $10 billion, and numerous questions that you deserve the answers to. It could be that all of this has happened simply because people are good and because they are competent. It could be that we have these unanswered questions because there is no fraud, waste, and abuse. But we have a fiduciary duty as public officials to look at the causes. And so now, let me close with this. Whether you decide to extend funding for the rail from the state or not to extend it, please, this session, call for a full forensic audit to look for fraud, waste, and abuse. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you.
Aloha.
Thank you very much. We'll continue on with the name calling. Anyone here from Honolulu Traffic and Kapolei Chamber?
My name is Cliff Slater. I'm the chairman of HonoluluTraffic.com. We're suggesting that the legislature not approve any funding for the rail until you have received a thorough and complete forensic audit to determine what has caused this financial disaster. Within 2006, it was at $2.58 billion, and it's now at 10. And nobody quite knows why. Hart has tried to put the blame on construction, cost escalations, but when we looked at it, we found that the actual construction cost inflation in the last 6 years has been less than what Parsons Brinckerhoff had forecast in the final EIS. Hart has also tried to put the blame on lawsuits, but on their website they show that even their inflated cost estimates of both lawsuits together amount to less than 2% of the cost of the project. So you have to ask, where is the $5 billion in cost overruns gone? Since 2006, we have been forecasting heavy cost overruns for rail, but in all that time, we never forecast any overruns before rail got to Dillingham, because that's where the real trouble starts. And we're not even to Dillingham or even close to it. So we would suggest that you need to get a firm understanding of what caused the current calamity, and then you should get some sort of comfort about the Central City quagmire before you fund this thing. Because you had better be prepared to fund this as a $15 billion project. And that is $12 billion more than it would cost us to just shut it down. And that's my 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Slater. We'll continue on. Honolulu Traffic.
No, that's Allen Traffic.
Oh, that was it. Kapolei Chamber. Kohala Coast Resort Association. Democratic Party of Hawaii. And I have added to it was Kupuna Caucus. So is the Kupuna Caucus the same as the Democratic Party? Okay, hearing none. Maui Hotel and Lodging Association. Move Oahu Forward. Tax Foundation. Texas Association for Public Transportation. Waikiki Improvement Association, please. After will be the Hawaii Kai Neighborhood Board.
Good afternoon, chairs and vice chairs and members of various committees. Thank you for having this hearing. And I know it's been a tough day, long day, but I do think it's important to get all the facts out and to hear what people have to say. The Waikiki Improvement Association really has officially only opined on one part of what you're considering today, and that is, should the TAT be increased in order to provide a part of the package to fund rail? And we are opposed to that. We firmly believe that the GET is a better source of funding for rail. It's a tax that we've become accustomed to. I've listened, in fact, I've learned a lot today by listening to everything that's been said, so it has been very enlightening. But I think one of the things that we have to recall is that Hawaii relies very heavily on its visitor industry, particularly in Waikiki. Waikiki was what really helped to carry us out of the last recession. It supports the economy and by its extension the state tax revenues. And yet, visitor spending on Oahu, if you follow the storyline, has actually been declining for the last 2 years. And we believe that the end number for 2017 will also show a decline. not an increase, certainly not an 8% increase that is in the projections for one of your alternatives that include the TAT. The current increases that you see are the neighbor islands catching up on room rates because Oahu certainly led the way, and it led the way because of over $4 billion in reinvestment in Waikiki. If we had the Waikiki of 2000 today, we would be in dire shape because you wouldn't be seeing the revenues and therefore the TAT and the GET that we have that at least puts us in a solid financial position today. So I'm very concerned that when I look at and I really appreciate this, by the way, because before this I had no idea what was in these potential packages, but I believe very strongly that the two packages that include the TAT, the Oahu-only TAT and the statewide TAT, are both faulty, that you will not get the revenue that you project on those options. And to expect TAT to increase at an average of 8% a year for the life of these increases is totally unrealistic. That was arrived at by averaging the last 5 years, and as Chair Hanneman pointed out, that those were very inflated by the fact that we had high percentages as we were recovering from the last recession. Current last couple of years have only been 6%, and those have been good years. And so to expect us to average 8% for the entire life of this package is totally unrealistic. But the bottom line is that the TAT is not a good part of this package. If you expect to be able to walk away from the special session with knowing that you funded rail so that it can be built to Ala Moana and in a reasonable time period, I would urge you to extend the GET because that's the only reliable way you'll do it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Rick. Hawaii Kai Neighborhood Board, Mililani Waipio, Milimanu Neighborhood Board. Okay. Please. Okay, then you will have 2 minutes. Okay. Kupuna Caucus, I think I called earlier. We will proceed now with the groups on the individuals. Members, you want to take a 2-minute break or shall we just continue on? Okay, we'll roll on. Okay, the way we register those individuals at this time, we will proceed. When you came up to sign in, you were allowed a Group A or Group B. If you're on Group A, will you just line up over there? And you are going to be timed. Just a few reminders. We'll keep your remarks to 2 minutes, so we will have a chance to hear from everyone. We have the timekeeper here, and she's right there, who will raise a yellow card. Okay, the first call is the yellow card at 1:30, 1.5 seconds, and then the bell will ring at 2 minutes.
Excuse me, Chair.
So the time is up.
Will there be any questions of the last cycle of testifiers? Are there any questions of those who just
All right,
testified?
let me read the individuals, and I will get back to you.
I have a
Can I
Cliff
finish this?
Slater or a
Oh.
Kaylee Aquina question.
Okay.
No need already. Move on.
Before, I'm sorry for the individuals. We've been asked, for those that testified earlier in the groupings, there may be some questions. Can you ask him who he's going to call?
Okay, Rep Board.
Who
do you want to?
Either Cliff Slater or Kaylee Aquina, the ones who were talking about the forensic audit, those who are most familiar with that. Kaylee is here. Kaylee, the notion of a forensic audit, I have been talking to some CPAs, and they said that it's better to use the word efficiency audit. Forensic suggests you're a grand jury, you're coming in, you got something possibly guilty. A efficiency audit is your management and your handling of money. It's more like a discovery that an attorney would do. Do you want to use forensic to scare the people versus an efficiency audit? And are one and the same, except for the implications and the stereotype of one and the other, really any different?
Well, Representative Ward, thank you for your question. Shakespeare put it this way: a rose by any other name would smell as sweet. We're talking about terminology here, so rather than quibble over whether it's called a forensic audit or some other term, it's important to specify the elements. It must be an audit that is independent, comprehensive, and thoroughly looks for fraud, waste, and abuse. This is important because the other types of audit may accidentally discover fraud, waste, and abuse in their attempt to determine performance and so forth. But the kind of audit that this legislative body should call for is one that is independent and comprehensive and specifically searches out fraud, waste, and abuse.
So criminality is necessarily not always associated with it.
Criminality is not the goal for discovery. Facts are the goal. If they result in a criminal application, that's secondary. This body, the legislature, needs to know where the money has been spent, how it's been spent, and whether there's fraud, waste, or abuse.
Do you think Mr. Slater would agree with you?
He'll have to respond to himself.
Thank you. Thank you, Keely.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. House members, any other questions? Seeing none.
Okay, we'll proceed then with the hearing for the individuals. I'd like to again say that the yellow tags is for the 1 minute. Is that 1 minute or 1.5? 1 minute, and then the stop is the bell as well. Okay. All right. And we appreciate when you're done, then return to your seats. And for the rest of you who are in the audience, just refrain from making any noises that will distract the committee members from hearing the testimony as well. Okay. Please, Group A.
Okay, well.
And when you speak as well, you can identify yourself.
Greetings, brothers
Aloha.
and sisters. I'm Dennis Callan, and I'm here. I want to share some good news with you, and that is that you do not need a special session. You do not need to extend any further taxes because there's a very simple and elegant solution to this whole problem, and that is to bring the rail down to street level at Middle Street into a bus transfer station, and then the passengers transfer to express buses and continue from there. For example, into downtown on North King Street, it's just 3 miles. The lights can be synchronized. There's only 4 cross streets on North King Street. The riders will be there in 10 minutes to downtown. If they take the train, they have 5 more stops on the train station, then that'll bring them to Aloha Tower, and then they have to walk to downtown. So the bus would be quicker, obviously cheaper, can be done more immediately. Don't believe the city when they say the FTA requires elevated to Ala Moana. This city has no credibility when it comes to rail. We can't believe anything they say. If you deny them the funding to go through downtown as elevated, they will have no other choice. They can build it to middle. Fine. The contracts are let. The money is there. The bus can also go to Waikiki via express, nonstop from Middle Street. Synchronized traffic lights on the streets that we have already. King Street, North King Street, South King Street, Kalakaua, bang, you're in Waikiki. The mayor and Roger Morton this morning admitted Ala Moana is not even an end destination. It's just a bus transfer point. Well, transfer them to bus at Middle Street then. It would be a better ride. It would be a quicker ride to the destination, to the university, right down South King Street. Synchronized traffic lights. Use what we've got already with our great bus system. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, next one, please. Thank you.
Aloha, my name is Randall Roth. A number of remarks have been made today about doing an audit and what it means to call for a forensic audit. I guess given the limited amount of time I have, rather than talk specifically about certified public accountants like like my background and others, what we think of when we hear the word audit or what lawyers think of with forensic, let me simply underscore what HART isn't planning to do. The numbers have increased dramatically in terms of the cost. I think in a matter of time you would find out that the ridership projections are even more flawed than what the cost estimates have been. But at the first HART board meeting that I attended, as most people have since heard, one of the HART board members, and this is the group responsible for oversight, said that she had no interest in looking at what may have been stupid, screwy decisions in the past, that she didn't want to muck around in the past. Another HART board member said maybe we would just discover that we've already corrected whatever would be uncovered. My point is the HART board is responsible for oversight, and we know from the HART board that they're not going to do anything remotely close to oversight. So never mind the niceties of what forensic means, they're not doing their job. They're here asking you for a blank check, and it's hard for you to say no after $2.5 billion has been sunk into this project. But if it's hard after $2.5 billion, think how hard it's going to be after $3.5 or $4.5 or $5.5 billion. In other words, if you say yes now, you're giving them a blank check, and you're giving it to them without any accountability because the group responsible for oversight has said, we don't want to muck around in the past. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Randy. Next one. I'm sorry, did I miss you with the group?
Yes, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I'm Shannon Olivado on behalf of the General Contractors Association. Thanks for this opportunity to share our support for this project and also the ability to review the 5 options provided with respect to the different funding mechanisms. Today, GCA, as you all know, we support the project. I think what's important is that the bill provide and satisfy the full funding grant agreement with the same technology, the same route, and bringing it to Ala Moana. In different from the previous speaker, we don't agree with that this project should be stopped, and for the very reasons of the future of Honolulu and for our children who will be one day riding this rail system. I think what we don't talk about is what is at risk with regard to the federal funding and other future projects and how it could impact that. And secondly, the bill should provide a new source of funding that would withstand any legal challenges. As we've heard initially, there has been legal challenges that have increased costs. We do not want to have this project or this new funding provision or bill to propose something that would make it legally challengeable. And lastly, that the bill would be a new source of funding that wouldn't impact the dedicated services of our counties. I think the previous testifiers earlier this morning talked about the impact of such services in their own counties. And I think Honolulu, with their progress of this project, once the first column went in, and now that we see it at Aloha Stadium, there's no way, I don't think, that our city would like to see that project stopped. We attend the monthly meeting that was talked about, the TOD Interagency Council. It's amazing that there's so many agencies participating in this monthly meeting, talking about what's to come for Honolulu, talking about the revitalization of Mayor Right housing that would increase the amount of housing available for the people that are living currently on our streets, and for the future of UH West Oahu and our students that could potentially commute between UH Manoa and UH West Oahu. I mean, all of this is something that we've started, and there's no way we can end it now. I think what's really innovative, and I'm sorry, I'm getting the red card, is the talk about the P3. And I look on the stage and I see, the visionaries of the acronym that started with P and ended with a C. I won't say it, but I just know that was a vision that all of you, that were in this body at the time saw a vision for potential state lands being used to utilize and look at the vision of what rail could bring through Honolulu. It was an inventory. We're starting the inventory of the state lands and what could bring about with the rail project. And I think, going forward, sorry. Thanks, Chair.
We hear you, Shannon.
Thank you. And for that, I just want to end with respect to the oversight on our contractors and the oversight with the audits. Numerous opportunity to condition this funding mechanism to ensure that it gets us to Ala Moana as planned. Thank you.
Thanks, Shannon.
Aloha, my name is Roy Nakamura. We did sign up as a group, Financial Accountability for Rail Mass Transit, followed by former Senator Rod Tam, Charles Corot, Frank Ginadio, Elaine Cam, Moses Napiha, Calvin Hulihe. In addition to rail costs, more problems. The fraudulent claim of Kamehameha Highway doesn't belong to the city, or state, or even federal. It belongs to the Kingdom of Hawaii royal family with a allodial title. Rental fees are due of, you folks ready for this? $1,498 million. The entire city and the entire Honolulu city block does not belong to the city or agencies. They do not have allodial title. Only royal family have this allodial title. The ownership billing was mailed and given to Governor, Mayor, and Hart, Attorney General's office, State Transportation, and Post Office. The agency failed to respond and defaulted after 7 days of notice. Was delivered on July 10, 2017. All agencies are squatters and need to be removed by law, identical to the Sand Island squatters. Our paramount superior title records were shown to the public prosecutor, police officers, sheriff office, and were each given a copy of a complaint for the records.
Okay, Mr. Nakamura, your time is up.
Aloha. Mahalo.
Aloha.
Good afternoon. I am former Senator Rod Tam, City Councilman, a member of the Financial Accountability for Rail Mass Transit Association. On the private side, I'm a business consultant specialized in business marketing plans, legal research, financial budgeting, and international East-West relations. My presentation is on the lack of financial accountability and the lack of concern for Hawaii's taxpayers' affordability to pay for the city's rapid transit system known as the Steel and Steel Rail Transit System by Mayor Kirk Caldwell and Honolulu HART and the City and County of Honolulu City Council. Taxpayers' dollars must be accounted for. At this time, the association presents to you collected secondhand financial costs and projected cost information collected from the Star Advertiser on the steel and steel rail construction costs for your analysis. I'm going to give you attachment A. In the months from April to August 2017, the association had attempted to get first-hand concrete financial information from the mayor, the city council, and Hart. Unfortunately, without success. The following was done. Number one, communicated with the City Council, Mayor Caldwell, and Hart to the City Council's public hearings in trying to obtain concrete past, present, and future financial information on the budgets and expenditures for rail construction, administration, and maintenance. Number two, requested the Federal Transportation Association Administration, FTA, to audit Hart on its federal funds expenditures of the rapid transit system in line with the FTA's request for the city for financial accountability and a concrete financial plan to pay for the steel and steel. Unfortunately, FTA refused to do so. One can only conclude that there's collusion going on between the two, the city and FTA. I have letters to that effect in terms of approaching for an audit and also the response, if you so desire. Number three, sponsored an informational people's public hearing on August 5th, 2017, invited the mayor and his Hart and the seven, because I'll give you copies of those two.
Okay, Rod,
Yes.
time is up.
Okay, can I just end?
If you can leave
Yeah,
the
okay.
testimony with us, why don't you just leave a
I submitted the testimony. In fact, we registered it as a group, yeah.
We do have
Okay,
that.
you have it? Okay. But
thank
also, I want to conclude by saying that we do not need to pass anything in the special session. All we need is a financial audit, complete financial audit.
Thank
There
you.
is time. Thank you.
My name is Charles Corral. The city and county of Honolulu is not accurate in estimating ridership and rail construction costs. There should be an audit on the city rail construction costs, ridership projections, and potential operating and maintenance costs for the rail. Parson Brinkerhub forecasts for Honolulu and San Juan, Puerto Rico, with remarkable similar 116,000 for Honolulu and 114,000 for Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico's population is 2.8 million. The actual ridership for San Juan turned out to be only 32,800 in 2015, which is 71% less than what had been projected. The city rail construction has nearly doubled since 2012. There should be an audit done by the state auditor. The audit should be completed before the 2018 legislative session is concluded. The present rail construction has an additional funding of $350 million city funds for 2017. Thus, no funding is needed for the construction at this time. The money should be spent on a state auditor. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Charles.
Frank Gennaro, member of the association. Our group invited everyone to speak at our 5 August meeting, including those advocating technologies other than elevated steel wheels on steel rails. I was the only one who addressed an alternative conversion of the current project to a much less costly American-designed urban magnetic levitation system. With the help of Professor Singh of the engineering department at UH, who is currently in India, a cost estimate folio was prepared that addresses how we can complete all of the major elements of the 2012 FFGA while staying within available funding. That funding amounts to about $6.8 billion, realized through a combination of the existing rail surcharge that is authorized through 2027 and obligated federal funds. The major elements of the FFGA to me are for a 20-mile grade-separated system, 21 stations and 4 park and ride lots with 4,100 spaces, a maintenance and storage facility, a transit center at Pearl Highlands, 80 light metro, fully automated driverless rail cars, and 3-minute service during peak hours. A plan based on maglev 2000 can deliver these elements, including full use of the existing 10 miles of guideway to Aloha Stadium, with a maglev-only guideway for the remaining 10 miles. Technology also will enable use of the existing guideway by steel-wheeled trains, so there will be no need to scrap already delivered rail cars. Our cost estimate is $5.86 billion, an amount that the principals of maglev 2000 believe is higher than their estimate. We use the price of paradise. That's a far cry from what a member of this city council said it would be 10 times the cost of steel wheels, a gross overestimation. I was not permitted to respond to that, but I will take the word of Dr. James Powell, holder of the patents for both first and second generation superconducting maglev, as well as the metal from the Benjamin Franklin. I'm sorry, madam, but you know, a lot of people had a lot of time here. I'd like to be able to finish this short testimony.
I'm
if
sorry.
I will.
We did
I'm sorry?
I'm sorry. We did cut off everyone else after 2, so.
Yeah, well, you
2
didn't cut
minutes.
off a lot of people from the city and from Hart and from a lot of other people. We waited here for
Frank, if you can, if
5
you don't
hours.
mind giving us your testimony, if it's, is it different from what we have in our?
Well, let me just conclude by saying, are you
Just
willing
closing
to give the
remarks,
city
please.
the funding authorities it needs to continue throwing good money after bad? Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Aloha. My name is Elaine
We'll move the microphone near you. Thank you. Good to
yes.
see you.
My name is Elaine Cam, and I'm a member of the Financial Accountability for Rail Mass Transit Association. After I summarize our four speakers, I would like to present my short testimony. The first speaker, Roy Nakamura, spoke of our concern about financial accountability and affordability of the rail system and his concern about the allodial property of the royal family, and that many of our properties within the capital are subject to paying their bills, which they have not responded to. A second speaker, Rod Tam, a former state senator and budget analyst, provided specifics of the 7 questions needing answers from the city administration. And they seem to lack the concern for our lower and middle income taxpayers and their welfare, and the ability to pay for basics such as food and medicine. He presented escalating costs, concerns, and the association failed attempts to obtain financial accountability from our administrators. His main point was he wants to propose that you adopt a resolution for a comprehensive financial and forensic audit on the rail project at the special legislative session of August 28th before addressing any other future funds to pay for our overpriced rail system. And there is time, because bonds will fund rail through 2017, and the rail surcharge on the excise tax will run for another 10 plus years. You will be able to revisit rail funding in your regular 2018 session. Federal money will still be there, and you will become available when the PFTA sees a sound financial recovery plan. The current financial burdens on our citizens must be disregarded whenever this legislature considers how best to fund our rail. And Charles Carroll, a former urban planner of the New York State and Department of Business and Development and Tourism of Hawaii, stressed the need for adult. Okay, may I please? And then, as you know, Frank.
Elaine,
Donato.
can you, we're going to cut you off, and if you haven't submitted that testimony reading, if you can give it to our staff, please.
Can I just go through mine in 1 minute?
No, I think we had 2 minutes, so if you can do it like yeah,
I'll try to do it.
Just
Okay,
close it up.
Close
it up as soon as you can.
My research has shown that our dependence upon the rail has really changed, and so has our people's transportation needs throughout the nation. And this is in regard to LA, New York, Chicago, Puerto Rico, San Francisco, and Hawaii. People are not working at the
Thank you,
same...
Elaine. I think we do, there's quite a bit, and we do need to get out of this auditorium, so we want to hear from Group B as well.
I did want to say that I think we should stop the rail because of our overwhelming expenses.
Okay, thank you, Elaine.
Thank you for your time.
This is my first time speaking, so I'm a rank amateur at this, but...
Please proceed in your name.
My name is Keone May.
I'm sorry, please again.
Keone May.
Keone.
Yeah, I had a function prior to this morning, which is why I'm still dressed up from that function, the Kamamalu building.
Yep, proceed.
I'm a 67-year-old retired, as well as taxpayer, concerned citizen, and registered voter since 1973. I've watched changes throughout Hawaii. I can start with when I graduated Roosevelt High School when I could see the ocean. Now I can't even figure out which direction it is. I went to the old KCC, which no longer exists, behind McKinley High School. I went to the UH, and we didn't have to call it UH at Manoa. Now, leading up to this, as far as the rail, I believe we're talking about transportation, just like how H1, H2, H3, and a 92-year-old land is banking on each four. You're really overdeveloping Hawaii to the point that you require all these extra forms of transportation, including the rail. I believe the rail should go through, but the problem is it's only going to solve things temporarily. What happens after you find out that it's now crowded all over the place? I just wanted to bring that up because we've gotten to the point where everything is saturated. Land, sea, air. Where are you going to build next? Underground. I just had to put that 2 cents in because I'm really getting upset that we're now vertical concrete. We are no longer horizontal concrete. I don't see too many pieces of vegetation anymore anywhere. We're running out of water. That's my speech.
Thank you, Keone. Aloha.
Aloha. My name is Calvin Hulehe, and I just want to speak for my akua, for the Mother Nature, and for Liliuokalani, for what is right, what is justifiable. And yeah, the land, all the land in Hawaii is the Kingdom of Hawaii. There's a entitlement, there's allodial land. We have proof, we have papers. You show us your papers, and we show our papers. We sit down, we have a talk. Okay? And plus, you guys owe us money, rent. $1.498 million. $1,498 million. We did our audit, okay? So you guys go do your guys' audit, or hard. And then you show the paper, and we show the paper, we sit down, we have a conversation. Same like with North Korea, whatever, you like peace. We have to show aloha, show respect. Sit down, drink coffee, eat luau, whatever, talk. And let's have a aloha way of attitude. And have a balance, bureaucracy. And have a compromising way. So we have calm. That's peace. Thank you. Aloha.
Okay. Aloha, Calvin. Thank you.
My name is Moses Napiha'a. I here to testify for two things. One, I agree with three things. I agree with the rail. The rail must go through because it's a money maker. It's beyond our imagination. The hotel industry itself is very important to the rail. Then Kapolei got nothing. People don't want to go down there to see nothing. The other factor is Disneyland. They're making a lot of money. Let's increase that portion. Put a theme park up there. Now we increase the growth in tourism. And you put this all together on a board. Directors or anything like that. I tell you right now, you folks can have something that actually can pay the rail and don't worry about the taxpayers. The taxpayers would be very happy to find out that we don't have to pay the taxes anymore. Go for the, just go for it and think about it. Think what tourism can do for you and what the Disneyland can do for you. But it's not only Disneyland by itself. We have to have more than that down that end. Because Disneyland itself produce so much income that comes into this sector. You can imagine if you increase the size on Disneyland. Besides that, you're talking maybe Six Flags, maybe the Water World. Anything that actually can produce some kind of income to help support the rail. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Moses. Aloha.
Good afternoon. Michael Galoyu. The rail project deserves a clean and reliable funding source, and that is the GET tax extension. For me, a perfect bill would be the GET to be extended in perpetuity. That is, until you all get your act together and figure out a less progressive tax form. Because when the rail project ends up to Ala Moana, we do want to see it to go to Manoa. We do want to see it to go to the East Kapolei. We do. They are already talking. My friends in Mililani would love to see a spur go out there as well. So yes, we are going to need more funding for that. The proposed 1% TAT will result for our residents as well as our visitors a double tax because the 0.5% GET is going to already be there. So yes, and remember, we residents also do, we locals also do pay the TAT when we go to Waikiki to celebrate an anniversary, for conferences, for birthdays. So yes, we do pay into that as well. So I wanted to make sure that was perfectly clear. TAT is a very volatile one, especially under the current federal administration. Just ask our friends in Guam. They're already seeing a deep decline in their tourist trade. So it was said earlier today that the state has been a very good partner in this. You have not. A good partner would not be taking 10% off the top. To Rep. Cochola's question earlier, has the GET been, for the rail, been paying for anything else? Yes, it has. It's been paying for DOE tax, because you basically get enough from the GET 10% that you take from us to pay for the entire funding of the Department of Taxation. So yes, the skim, there would be no skim if you guys were a good partner. You guys would have exempted the the rail project from the GET if you were a great partner. So, and this idea of taking the rail at grade does not make sense. Just ask Phoenix. In the first year alone, they had 69 accidents that shut the system down. They've lost an average of 3 lives every year to those accidents. I believe people's lives are very worth the price of this rail project. So I do ask that you go into special session and come out with a clean funding source. This project deserves a serious consideration. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Mike.
Hello, my name is Carolyn Martinez Galoyu. I have lived here and paid taxes since 1981. I do not resent paying taxes that go to the outside, to the neighbor islands, because we are a state. Although we are bounded by water, we are a state and we're supposed to be Ohana. I am very disturbed about people on the dais and people in the audience today that brought up a very divisive thing to say that, well, don't do this and don't do that because we don't use it. I go to the neighbor islands. I'm fortunate. I pay their taxes. I'm glad to. I go to New York and I pay lots of taxes. I go to California, 10% sales tax. So come on, folks, get with the program. I didn't spend what I spend today 10 years ago to go to the movies. You have, if you've done any renovations in your homes, you will know that costs rise. And we need to pay our workers. And our workers deserve a fair shake. You cut out this rail, you are going to have to get rid of all that cement. And nobody wants it in their backyard. Where are you going to put it? How much is it going to cost you? 3-point-some million more dollars? Be for we the people, not we this little bit of people and that little people. I'm 71 effing years old, and I want to ride the rail. I've been working. I have been not working. I don't get paid for what I do. I do it because I want to see rail. I want to see us get into the next century. So stop playing games. Let's do your jobs and stop putting down the people that are experts in their field. Thank you very much. Aloha. I'll have more to tell you, but I'll send you emails.
Thank you.
Don't
you,
worry.
Carol. Okay, Group B and C, I think if you're here, you can start lining up. B and C. Okay. Proceed, please.
Aloha, committee chairs and vice chairs. My name is Scott Wilson. I'm an architect, planner, and member of Salvage the Rail. Our group organized a public forum on rail in this room in July. At that forum, which can be seen on olelo.org, you can see the proceedings at any time. Anyway, at that forum, there were 3 nationally recognized rail transit experts, and they discussed their recommendations for this project. They were actually unanimous. The current elevated guideway should stop at Middle Street. Beyond Middle Street, the project should connect to a street-level rail system, and most importantly, this option called 2A can be completed without any further tax monies. Option 2A was outlined by Hart in June of 2016, and it called for a separate street level rail after Middle Street. Street level rail, based on the latest numbers out of Los Angeles, costs between 100 and 150 million per mile. So basically, this option 2A could be initially as short as a 3-mile loop on North King, Alapai, and Baratania. It would cost 450 million. The only other cost is that they have to make an O&M facility, but they have 26 acres of land already at Middle Street, and they have a budget for additional land, which they will not need along Dillingham and in Kaka'ako. So basically, the total cost of this project is $795 million. You look at your actual current funding, you have $580 million after Middle Street. You have another $300 million, which you can get if you lower your state skim to 1%, so you would have $880 million. You would actually could cover your $795 million cost. So finally, the EIS. As we know, as we learned today, we've just heard that the rail route at the end of Ala Moana has actually been changed and approved by FTA. So we know that change to a rail, it does not take 3 to 5 years. So all I want to say is, if you extend funding for rail, the city will not consider these options. So you have a duty, please, on behalf of the taxpayers and our future taxpayers, consider the options to elevated rail after Middle Street and postpone further funding of this project until those options are vetted.
Thank you, Scott.
Thank you.
Aloha, my name is Christine Trecker. 2 things. Number 1, I strongly urge you to vote no to additional funding for the rail project. This will force the city to stay within budget, the existing budget, and to explore other worthy, more cost-effective options, such as the one Scott Wilson just described by the group Salvage the Rail. Number 2, I think at this important juncture, it's really critical that we revisit what exactly $10 billion is going to buy us in traffic relief. If we refer to the city's own EIS table 3-12, they predict that if rail is built, it will reduce the number of cars on Oahu roadways by 1.6%. That is, yes, less than 2% reduction in cars on the road. But then you say, well, it's really not about traffic. It's really about providing an option for people who want to ride on the rail. The city in that same table predicts that if rail is not built, 5.9% of commuters will be just using the existing bus system. However, if they build rail, they project that 7.1% of commuters will be using mass transit. So that's bus and rail together. Yes, you're right. That's 1.6%. These very modest benefits in no way justify us paying over $10 billion for a rail project. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Christine.
Hi, my name is Mark Weidman. I just want to thank everybody here for being here and having this get together. A lot of clarity has been given. I'd like to say that like the president, I am pro-worker and pro-infrastructure. I'm in here today. I benefited from the jobs created by this project, as I have indirectly. I think the pink elephant, I mean, there's been a lot of exchange here, a lot of clarity. The pink elephant for me in the room is the fact that the $2 billion in finance costs, right? Is that on the 5.2 billion? Is that on the 8.2 billion? Or is that just on the extension? Right? And then, having said that, if our credit rating is so great at a AA or whatever it is, right, and we're paying either 25% if it's on the 5.2 billion, or on the 8.2 billion, or 40% of finance costs on the 5.2 billion. If our credit's so great, then why are we paying so much? So either we're being ripped off on finance charges, or our credit rating isn't that great. So I urge you guys to look at that, look closely into that. That's where the audit has to come in, because $2 billion in just finance charges could be going to the people working, trying to make this thing. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Aloha. Thank you for holding this hearing. My name is Ursula Retterford, and I stand in complete opposition to a further extension of the GT tax to finance the rail project. I'm not opposed to this extension because I live on the windward side. I am opposing it because it does not make sense, and it is a misuse of taxpayers' money. I was opposed to this from the beginning when the projected cost was about $3 billion. How can any honest person justify to us taxpayers an increase from that figure up to 8 or even 10 billion today and keep asking for more? What is wrong with the place we are living in that our taxpayers can be hoodwinked in such a shameless way? Something is wrong. Our geographical configuration and layout never favored a fixed, inflexible steel-on-steel line. It is wrong. Technology were never designed to serve the transportation needs of our island. As admitted even by the promoters of this project, it will do little to improve traffic. We do not have the demographics and tax base to finance and maintain this project. It is unsustainable. Rather than continue to feed the inevitable monster, let's be sane, admit our mistakes, cut our losses by stopping at Middle Street and transition to street level at less cost and an earlier completion date. It would serve the transportation needs, better make later flexible extensions more possible, and save our waterfront and city from visual disfiguration. I plead with you to help stop this runaway juggernaut that is threatening to bury us in financial quagmire and destroy the fair face of our city with little improvement in our traffic woes in exchange.
Thank you. Thank you, Ursula.
There is a remark that I would like it to make. I have lived in Hawaii for 50 years, but I was born and raised in Switzerland. And that is a land where projects get finished on time, on budget, and sometimes even under budget.
Thanks, Ursula.
Good afternoon. Natalie Wassa.
Good afternoon.
Thank you for holding this hearing. I'm a CPA and a certified fraud examiner. I hope you've received my written testimony. I'm asking for 3 things. First of all, stop the funding. Second, a forensic audit. And third, look at all reasonable options. You know, one of the things I wanted to mention that we've been told over and over again recently is that rail is halfway done. Well, no, it isn't. If you look at the reports, it's about 1/3 of the construction is done. It's about 36%. So there's time to look at other options. The City Council passed the most recent HART budgets with 0 cuts. They've failed us. And earlier this morning, we heard the chair of the budget, or the City Council, say that he made a commitment that the City Council would not be here asking for more funding. Well, as I recall, the permitted interaction group that was authorized through resolution does not allow him to make any commitments. So I ask you to consider that. The FTA has extended the planning, the updated financial plan several times. They've failed us. HART Board has failed us. We are left with you, and I ask you to take into consideration all these good comments you've heard today. Good decisions require good information, and the projections that you have currently do not provide complete information. They do not show operations and maintenance with overlays of what that will cost out into the future. And one of the things I think is really important to consider is that real property taxes bring in about $900 million a year. The operating and maintenance are scheduled to be over $100 million. That's over 10%. And if we're having problems now paying for our bills, how are we going to pay for the O&M? That has to be considered now. We can't construct this with absent of looking at the O&M. So I ask you to take a look at that. And one other thing I wanted to mention, that one of the city administrators said they've been so focused on what we're building that the options that they've looked at haven't worked out well because they're so focused. So that's why I'm asking to stop the funding so we can look at the options.
Thanks, Natalie.
Hi, Mary Smart. I'm testifying for myself as an individual, but I'm also the treasurer of Hawaii Federation of Republican Women. I'm also a minority opinion on the Mililani Neighborhood Board because I'm against the rail. I've been against the rail from the beginning. I'm against any more funding being given to the rail. And I have to thank you for today because I'm really impressed with your questions. I've been questioning the management by heart and the city council, and your questions were so terrific, and as bad as I thought things were, they're even worse. The arrogance, Senator Kim, her comment, that's my feeling. That City Council is a rubber stamp. Whatever they want, whatever it costs, they're going to pay it. They aren't even here to hear us. They're not really interested. The arrogance that you're going to give them what they want, and they haven't made any other plans, that's disrespectful of the citizens. I'm from Mililani, and a lot of us do not want the rail in Mililani. We love our beautiful, quiet, pristine little town, so don't bring it to us. But it's not going to be a 10-year tax. They promised 10 years, but you hear they're going to extend it. They have plans to go to Manoa. They have plans to go other places. This is going to be, forever tax. We know that, and we're tired of being lied to. But I really appreciate what you've done today, sticking here so long to listen to us. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mary.
Oops. Are we allowing questions?
He has a question for me already?
No. Wait, please proceed.
Oh, I saw his hand.
After everyone is done, I think there's some hands being raised, but we want to make sure that we hear from all of you. And as I mentioned earlier, we need to get out of this auditorium. So please proceed, and we'll allow whoever wants to ask questions after someone is here.
By the way, I'm also from Mililani, and we do not want the rail there.
Your name, please.
My name is Rita Kamikimura, and I am against having a special session. I'm sorry that the mayor's not here. His people aren't here. The council isn't here. I believe there are a couple of people from Hart that are here, and I appreciate you folks for being here. I am a little grassroots from Mililani, so my testimony is what I want to share is very brief. If this were a private sector, comprehensive audits would have been done. Any fraud would have been exposed and those involved fired and possibly prosecuted. Those responsible for any overruns had better have a really good reason why, or they would be gone. This would not be tolerated anywhere else except in our government cartel. How could we possibly know how much money is really needed unless we have a total comprehensive report to see exactly where we are? Contrary to what Ember Shin may think, many of us would like to know where and how they mucked up the past. With that, I thank you all.
Okay. Thank you, Rita.
Good afternoon, Michelle Matsuo. Thank you so much for this opportunity to testify, and for all of you staying so long and being so earnest in your inquiry. I wanted to bring to your attention about the Hawaiian desecration that's involved in this rail project. And, I just can't believe that such a persistent disrespect and desecration of Hawaiian sacred sites has been allowed to continue, maybe without your even knowing it. But there's momentum gathering, because of the iwi and the sand in Maui. That case is moving forward, and they mined a well-known battlefield from the 1700s. And there's now a TRO, and the TRO has not been dissolved. and the court has jurisdiction. And that sand went from Maui, from Senator Agaran's district, I believe, into the concrete makers for rail. And that sand, may have the iwi kupuna in it of our warriors. And how can this happen? And no sifting, no cultural monitors for the first part of the rail. The shark god cave, the shark goddess cave, intricate Hawaiian trail systems, Elena Akohane, Leilono, interfered with the guideway going straight through. Thank you. Can I offer comments from the Education Caucus of the Democratic Party? Separate.
I did call earlier, and that I think I had Scott Foster's name on.
No, he's Kupuna. This is Education Caucus.
We need to hear from the rest of them.
Thank you.
But if you're allowed to speak for the Democratic Party, that's the other caucus, right? Not for the party itself. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is.
Please proceed. Thank you.
My name is Ken Farm. I am a member of the Kali'ipalama Neighborhood Board, but I'm speaking as a private citizen today. First thing I wanted to bring out is I'm in support of the rail. Number two is housing. The TOD potential for housing in our area is about 9,600. We're looking at 4 rail stations in our area. Part of the thing that happens if people were talking about in terms of cost-saving type measures. One of them was actually saying that we would bypass from Middle Street all the way down into either Ala Moana or Aloha Tower. That means we're going to be losing out on 9,600 potential home areas because we won't have the TOD zones in place, number one. Number two is the GE tax. The GE tax is the most stable tax that we have right now. We're asking people to pay an additional, if I'm looking at the math correctly, an additional 2 pennies for every dollar in addition to what the original GET tax was. If we, sorry, increasing the GE tax has not caused homelessness, but I will tell you what will cause homelessness is an increase in the land taxes. Because right now our rent is through the roof in most cases. Also, too, is the legal ramifications. If the FFGA, everything that we're mentioning, are we in violation of it? If that's the case, we open ourselves up to legal ramifications, lawsuit, and whatnot. I stand on my written testimony that I gave to you as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Kent.
Good afternoon. My name is Tom Kaufman. Thanks for the good questions and the interest and the patience and the dedication that's reflected in the hearing. I'm a board member of Hawaii Thousand Friends, and I'm also helping Scott Wilson with the Salvage the Rail initiative, meaning we advocate stopping the overhead construction at Middle Street and going to at grade. We've consulted leading figures in the rail industry, several people we've brought here. I think there's a lot of reason to believe that going at grade could possibly be done for the amount that's allocated. Certainly it saves an enormous amount of money. If you think about the problems of building the overhead guideway and the enormous stations that are associated with it. Secondly, it's going to save a lot of time because it's much simpler construction process. It saves the cityscape. It saves the waterfront. It is an at-grade system. It's slowly dawned on me is really an urban transit system. What we have with the overhead guideway from Kapolei to Middle Street is a commuter system. So we need a transition into something that really serves people within the city, gets people to where they really work, because people don't work at, Bishop Street and Nimitz, right? I followed the street level consultants around, and I was tremendously struck by the craving that continues to build to University of Hawaii. We can build to University of Hawaii by getting the system at grade in Middle Street.
Okay.
It will take some retrofitting, but these are choice questions. And the cost of the retrofit is minuscule compared
Thanks,
to the
Tom.
cost of continuing. I thank you
Mahalo.
very much.
Hello, Chad Taniguchi, Hawaii Bicycling League. We support rail and support finishing it with general excise tax. I live in Kailua, ride the bus every day with my bike, and I'm probably not going to use rail that often, but the people of the west side will. And how do I know? Well, if you make something convenient, affordable, people are going to choose it instead of a single-family car. Democracy is good. The people of Oahu have voted time and again to support rail and to elect people who support rail. State constitution says legislature has the power of taxation, also says state can delegate that power to the counties. So if you do that by enabling legislation, then let the people who are elected by the citizens of Oahu make the decision whether to enable that 0.5% tax or not, and let them be accountable for whether that fails or not. Because so far they've elected people who are saying rail is right, we want to finish it. I hope legislature will respect who's supposed to make the decision in this case and just make it possible for them to make the decision rather than making the decision. And maybe some of you will want to run for mayor or run for city council in the future, but let the people who are in charge now put rail to completion so that it can be done. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Chad.
Thank you very much. Michelle Matsuo, Chair of the Education Caucus of the Democratic Party of Hawaii. We are very concerned about rail usurping everything. It's the driving conversation. What happened to education? You know, we're looking at funding rail ahead of education. And we're concerned that once you give this new monies to this project, that we won't be able to fund education and the social services that we need. And for what? You know, this project doesn't have electricity. They're running the trials using heavy equipment to push it. There's no PUC application for the massive amount of electrical power generation that's going to be required. PUC said they have to come, but they haven't applied. We're in the FEMA zone, inundation zone, maybe illegally. We're driving our development into the inundation zone. And SOEST, top in the world, is saying that we may be looking at 12-foot sea level rise, worst case scenario, by the end of the 2100. They're recommending we build light and movable, you know, like wood structures, things that can be dismantled and moved back as the oceans come toward us. Instead, we're building heavy into the very places that we could be hit by catastrophe and driving all of our residential development for the future into this zone. And meanwhile, what about the schools? So thank you very much for listening. Thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Michelle.
I'm Mike Britton from Wahiawa, born and raised in Hawaii. And I've been in and out all day today. And the one thing I haven't heard about was talking about the people. And for the last 5 or 6 weeks, I've been taking a night class on Wednesdays. And I met a lady named Virginia. She lives out in Kapolei. And as we were leaving about the second week, I heard her say she had to catch the bus. So being from Wahiawa, I figured 20 minutes out of my way, I'd take her home. After convincing her my wife wouldn't kill me and that it wasn't an inconvenience, she let me know it'd be okay, and I started driving her home. And I told her, 20 minutes from me, I'll save you an hour. She let me know it takes her 2.5 hours on that bus. Right? So I drove her home. Then she showed me the bus stop as we were getting next to her house. I measured it almost a mile to her house. She told me how sometimes she's got to walk in the rain. Sometimes some guys harass her, she's walking, but that's okay, she crosses the street. This lady gets home at 12 o'clock every night. She works in a hotel in Waikiki. She wakes up early, catches the 5 o'clock bus. That's why we support rail. That's why we did this. I got nothing to add for money, for all the technicalities, the solutions, but remember the people. That's aloha. That's why you guys are up there. I trust you guys. I know you guys will do the right thing. But remember the people.
Thank you, Mike. Okay, winding down to our last speaker.
Hello, my name is Evelyn Say. I was born in the state of Hawaii before statehood, so I probably have age on most of you. I started working in the Dole cannery system. I have my master's now from University of Hawaii Manoa. And through high school, I traveled from Pearl City to Kahala, because that was my choice, and back. And I also traveled from Pearl City to Manoa and back, more than 2.5 hours each way. I'm thinking of those who are children now. I'm thinking of those who are elderly now. The reason why we are considering rail, first of all, is because it is above ground. It does not congest our streets more. We want to make it easier for our children and our kapuna so that they do not have to lug those heavy bags up and down the stairs of the bus, and they can have use of the elevators in those stations. I also believe that we do not have to tap into tourism. They are bread and butter. We cannot depend on it. Do not bite the hand that feeds you. We also cannot depend on state, I think. I think we should have our monies not going from our rail tax to state, but staying in Honolulu, especially Oahu. We can also manage this, I see, by P3. There are a lot of ideas that I have on that. I'll forward them to you later. But I don't think that we need to control our monies the way we have recently. Hawaii has always looked out for its high and low citizens. We have always taken care of our own, and we've looked out for our least able to. If we want that as a value system, then we will find a way. Thank you.
Thank you, Evelyn. And we thank all of you on behalf of the House and the Senate and all those on the staff. We thank you so much for putting in your time to help us set up, and Sergeant at Arms and okay, I'm being stopped, but we do have some questions. House, is that your member?
Okay, I think I saw some hands
Isaac, who
earlier.
has mastered gravity-defying moves to amaze his audience.
Great show. Here you go.
Now he's added it.
Thanks, Chair. It's not a question. I just want to make a comment because there's been a lot of references to people not being here. I was here for a few hours in the morning, and then I watched for a few hours in my office so I could have lunch, and then I came down for the last few hours. I guarantee you the governor's watching, the mayor's watching, the city councilmen are watching, all of my colleagues in government are watching. Just because they're not in this room, you guys know, you've been in this room. It was very full. Those people are still interested, still watching, still paying attention. So I just wanted to make that comment. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Report. Thank you, Chair. I'm not convinced that they may be watching. Hopefully they're listening. Scott Wilson. Scott, quick question. Thank you for bringing people together as you filled the room, I understand. But every time that people bring up your technical alternative, i.e. grade level, they say, oh, you got to buy new cars. How do you respond to that when they say, well, look, it's going to cost more money, it's not really saving anything? How could you respond to that?
Yeah, the option 2A involves a separate rail system of 20 cars. So you have a current Ansaldo contract for 80 cars. So 60 cars, the first 60 cars will be built exactly as specified, so there's no change. It's just that in the final 20-car batch that comes from Ansaldo, it will be low platform and it will be overhead power.
But are they more expensive?
No, they're the same price.
So
it's exactly the same length and everything, and there's no difference. Just the power, different power source, and it's a low platform car.
So they're disputing going down at grade level is not.
Yeah, the option 2A, as outlined by Hart, is a separate system, and that's the beauty of it. You can build to Middle Street, and there's no change in the contracts. We're not retrofitting, and there is a little bit of confusion out there because people think, oh, we're going to bust down some of the stations that are already built out in Kapolei. No, we're not calling for any change to any of the existing technology in Kapolei as far as Middle Street. It's a totally separate system, 3 miles in town, and all you need is a separate O&M facility at Middle Street.
Okay, thank you very much. That helps clarify. Thank you, chairs, for bringing us together. I wanted to comment on the note that there were good questions. I'm not sure there were good answers that were put out today, and I'm not sure we've kicked the can down.
Thank you. Senator Kahili. Senator Kahili.
Thank you, Chair. I have a question for Hart. Thank you. And I know it's been a long day. You know, I am the most junior member of this committee, and I wasn't here in 2015 when Hart came before this legislature and asked for the 5-year extension and promised that that's all it was going to need, 2027. And almost immediately after that legislature adjourned, it was already talking about needing another GE extension because of the cost of rail. It's now climbed to $8.2 billion. God forbid if we have to come back here, and I plan to be in this legislature a few years from now, to ask for another extension or for more money. But with the final, and we haven't procured the contract yet for the city center guideway, arguably the hardest and most difficult part of the project. We have electrical lines, telecom lines, water, sewer, gas. We're at sea level. We have EV. It's the downtown area of Honolulu. How much of a guarantee can you give us that this is not going to cost more than the $8.2 billion that you're saying it's going to cost now, when the most difficult part is ahead of us? And I've read the most recent PMOC monthly report that was published in June of 2017, and I have the HECO utilities plan in front of me, and that hasn't been designed yet. We don't know that yet. Who's going to accept the liability for the electrical lines if we have power disruptions? Is that something, who's going to put their signature on that? That's going to guarantee that service to our customers, and that this isn't going to be another cost, that's going to overrun.
Let me see if I can explain it. We have been working with HECO on Dillingham Boulevard for the past year and a half. We have a joint team of engineers from HECO, as well as our consultant and Hart, working together to make sure that we identify all their facilities and how they will be undergrounded, what kind of design is acceptable. So we have got a task force, a team working on it, so we have a better handle on what the final product ought to be. We also are working with the city of Honolulu to make sure that their utilities are all taken into account in our design, and we are doing a lot of potholing. You probably go along Dillingham Boulevard, you can see a lot of holes at every 100 feet or so that we have done to make sure that the drawings that we are showing reflects the actual conditions in the field. So that gives us a little much confidence that we know what we are dealing with. And in terms of the cost, we have now gone through almost 14 miles of 14.9 miles of the system, so we have a better handle on what the actual cost of construction is. And having negotiated so many changes with the contractors, we know how they mark up their prices, how they come up with their prices. So I think we have a better understanding of the local market as well as the schedule that local contractors take to build these things. One of the advantages we have one of the contractors of Honolulu on our board who has been helping us in going through all this analysis to make sure that we are accounted for things.
Would you agree that the city center guide rail is going to be the most difficult part of the project, regardless of the previous 14 miles that we've already built?
It is difficult. It's been a very constrained area. We've got limited space to work with. And then the closure is going to be very disruptive to the local people. So we have taken into that account in our scheduling.
Is there agreements that are going to be signed, sealed, and delivered prior to construction on the city center guide rail that will explain liability, will detail sewer, gas infrastructure, telecom, electrical, all of those things that are potentially unknowns?
That's our current plan, is to get all that final design done. We are also even looking at possibility of an early utility contract. So by the time the main contractor comes in, utilities are out of the way. That's one of the options we are looking at.
When do you think you'll have the idea for the city center guide rail?
Pardon me?
When do you think you're going to have the idea, or how much the contract is going to cost, what those liability agreements are going to be? When is HART going to have that?
Our construction cost for the city center guideway installation is $1.1 billion.
Okay.
All right, I think we're ending the session. We are to vacate the auditorium, need to clean up as well, and we'd like to thank everyone who has been here for a long time as well, and we thank staff who has worked hard for today's event. And thank you, House members and Senate committee members as well. Mahalo.